This video is a little bit of nerdy gaming theorizing, but I think it will be interesting to most of you who enjoy strategy games in general and the Warhammer Total War games in particular. I decided that instead of trying to explain at the beginning of each of my Let's Play videos what mods we're using to achieve a more immersive and, at least in my humble opinion, a better overall Warhammer 3 experience, it made more sense for me to make this video that hopefully succinctly explains everything that I can simply refer to from those Let's Plays in the future. Those of you already familiar with campaigns on this channel will not be surprised by any of the mods you see here, but you may be interested to hear a little bit more about how and why I arrived at using these particular mods out of all of the hundreds, if not thousands, on the Steam Workshop. For that matter, there are far more options out there than any one person can stay on top of, so maybe you might know of one or more that you think I should check out. If so, please feel free to mention it in the comments. Alright, enough intro, Michael. Let's get on with the discussion. So, I've gone on the record many times saying that Warhammer 3 is a fantastic game. Not flawless, of course. It does have a few very annoying aspects that irritate me when they pop up, but overall don't do much to diminish my love for the deep layers of strategy and tactics that come together wonderfully in the Total War franchise. Having said that, the vanilla experience sometimes leaves me wanting a little more. Or maybe a better way to explain it is that I see room for improvements. Much of this is subjective, naturally, but for me, I'd like to see more meaningful decision-making and a little less of the hyper-aggressive steamrolling that makes the majority of the campaigns feel like foregone conclusions after a few dozen turns, or sometimes even less. Thankfully, we have mods that can go a long way to achieving my concept of the ultimate Warhammer experience, and that, in a nutshell, is what this video is about. Not just the mods I use, not just what they do individually, but what they collectively accomplish to improve upon the vanilla Warhammer 3 experience. So what's lacking in the vanilla experience, and what should we do to improve it? Well, I've put together a couple of short little blurbs here. So the first thing that I think it's lacking in and that I would like to see improved upon is a more realistic strategy. So what that means to me, at least, is I'd love to see less nonstop aggression and conquering one settlement after another, that sort of steamrolling dynamic that I mentioned before that most vanilla Warhammer games have. I'd also like to see more field battles and a little bit fewer in the way of those minor settlement battles, particularly because they're part of the game that don't really play out as well as I like to think that they should. And then also harder and more meaningful objectives. And the way that I generally define that in a Warhammer campaign in terms of more meaningful objectives, well, it comes down to your settlements and forts, because that's where your population, your recruiting, and your resources all come from. So another thing that I'd like to see improved upon are more realistic battles, but it's important to say that they still feel like Warhammer battles. So obviously there is a limit to the amount of realism that we want to see when we're talking about Warhammer. But the main thing that I think that we can improve upon from a vanilla standpoint is that in the vanilla battles, it feels a bit like an arcadey click fest, where your ability to micro is more important than things like tactics, like maneuvering, flanking, hammer and anvil, envelopment. You get the idea. And then another important consideration when we think about having realistic battles, and not just realistic, but fun and playable battles, is a balance between melee and ranged, and between infantry and cav, and of course characters and monsters and all that sort of thing. Another aspect of building a better Warhammer experience for me is to have more meaningful character progression. And really what this means is to not level your character up too quickly, and for the choices between the different skills that you level up to be a little bit better balanced. So To me, the first aspect of this is I'd like to see a way to give a reason to choose neglected skills. Now, I will say that with the mods that I'm going to talk about in this particular video, this is maybe only a partial success. I'm always open to suggestions about mods that can do a better job. I think there are some mods out there that I need to do some testing of that really kind of rebalance the different skills to make it so that there aren't certain skills that you just never choose. But in any case, there are some improvements I think that we can make to that with the mods in this list. And then secondly, I believe that it's better to have a slower progression to make every skill up feel more rewarding. Again, the faster you level up your characters, the sooner you reach their maximum, or at least you go through all of the skills that are important to you. And then all of a sudden it starts to feel like, you know, there's no real reason to be continuing to give your characters more battles, more experience, and more skill ups because there's just less of an excitement factor, or less of a meaning to keep doing the skill ups. And then just one final note that I would make in terms of the mods that I talk about in this particular video are that I look for something that I would consider to be more of a vanilla plus experience rather than major overhauls. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I like the vanilla Warhammer game with, you know, a couple of caveats that we already mentioned, but mainly because overhauls are riskier, particularly when CA releases updates to the base game. I've seen recently some of the big overhauls that I've tried to test out. They have a tendency to not only come with more bugs because they're bigger and more complicated, but also they break much more easily whenever CA releases updates. And then in many cases, the overhauls also have some things that I like, but they also have unwanted functionality that you can't have one without the other. So what I prefer are small, simple, and for the most part, single-purpose mods, and so that's what you're going to see here. Together, they add up to meaning a whole lot, but individually, they are much more functional. By doing only one thing, there's less that can go wrong, basically. All right, so with all that being said, what mods have we selected to accomplish all this? First of all, I want to actually say a disclaimer here. These are not all the mods I ever use. These are just the basics. I thought it would be useful to set a minimum baseline to start with, to which more flavorful or functional mods can be added to for whatever fits the theme of a campaign. So these are the ones I consider essential that I very rarely ever will do without. And with no further ado, I'm not going to talk about all these in great detail. I will just mention them and very briefly what they do. So this is the order in which they are listed in the mod manager that I use, and I presume most other people use. So here they are. Garrison training, and what this does is each turn it adds a little bit of experience to all of your garrison units so that over time garrison units are training to improve as long as they don't get wiped out. If they get wiped out, obviously the units have to start from scratch again. Andy's slower movement. This slows down infantry speed by a little bit. It's not really dramatic, but it's noticeable. In battles, and this is one of several different mods that I'll talk about here that make the battles feel a little bit more tactical and a little bit less of a click fest that are over too soon. One of the others is slightly enhanced cavalry breakthrough, which it probably would make more sense for me to refer you to the mod page itself. It doesn't do a ton, but it improves the sense of impact that cavalry has on the charge, which I like. Tougher siege tweaks. This is a number of different modifiers that get applied to the defensive side in siege battles, both minor settlements and in major settlements. Longer battles mod, which is just sort of an adjustment, I think mainly to the two-hit chances in battles. So it sort of adds up with some of the other tactical mods that we're using here, again, to make it less of a click fest, make it so that the battles last a little longer, meaning you have more time for maneuvering. Realistic accuracy mod kind of goes hand in hand with this, which is a way to sort of accomplish the same thing but for ranged units. So basically missile units, which already can feel often a little bit overpowered, they'll miss a little bit more often, which means they'll feel a little bit less overpowered. Okay, realistic replenishment, really important one here. This is one where I think it adds a lot of realism to a campaign. Basically, you can't just steamroll from one battle to the next turn after turn and just count on your army just constantly replenishing to the point where you hardly ever need to slow down. Certain factions are affected more than others by this, but basically what it means is you fight a major battle with major losses, and you're going to have to take a little bit of time to lick your wounds and recover from it. And it also, in combination with that, is one of the mods that makes your skill choices for your characters more impactful. So you might find normally that you never really feel like taking the skill up that gives you a boost to your casualty replenishment, or maybe your technologies as well that boost casualty replenishment. Well, this is going to change all that. You're suddenly going to very highly value those things in your campaign. Okay, the minus 50% campaign army movement. This is a hugely transformational mod. This is basically what forces you to have to fight a lot more field battles, and it really impacts the campaign in a lot of different ways. You can no longer take one settlement one turn and then expect to immediately run out and take another one with that same army in the following turn, because it's just going to take you longer to get there. And there are sort of other benefits to this, which is you, as the player, you can see invasions developing. They won't just come out of the fog of war somewhere on the campaign map where you can't see them, and have the AI like race an army all the way through your territory and lay siege to one of your settlements without you even being aware that they were over there. This will at least reduce the impact or the opportunities for that to happen. But by the same token, it makes it very much harder for the player as well. You have to actually go multiple turns to get to your next target, which gives the AI an opportunity to react to it as well. And what that means is you might find yourself walking through perhaps territory where you might be subject to ambushes. You might be walking through territory that has corruption, and you might be suffering the attrition every turn. Little things like that, they can really add up to add a new dynamic layer to your strategy in this game. Okay, slower character progression 50%. This basically just slows down the rate at which your characters will gain levels for reasons that I've already mentioned and won't bother to go into any more detail on. And then finally, we have Greater Garrisons by Zorbaz. Now, there are different garrison mods out there that do basically the same thing. They make garrisons stronger, usually by giving more units, and in some cases by giving better units. Most of them are kind of, I hate to say, a little bit out of date. So there's no one perfect garrison mod out there. This is the one that I've had the best luck with in terms of it being close to being sort of not out of date, and also that the mod author has stayed up to updating every once in a while. So anyway, that's the list for me. That, again, is not everything that I ever use, but those are the ones that I consider to be the basic mods to sort of give you a foundation for a more immersive and just frankly overall a better Warhammer strategic and tactical experience. Hopefully it makes sense how those particular mods add up to achieving the goals we talked about at the beginning of this video. I encourage everyone to try a campaign or two of their own with this collection to see just how much it transforms the pacing and the decision-making of the game. Or, even better for me, watch some of my Let's Plays on this channel to try before you buy, so to speak. Or why not both? Anyway, as I mentioned before, feel free to add ideas of your own in the comments below. Or maybe you have your own thoughts about strategy gaming in general, or other ways to improve immersion and realism in Total War Warhammer. In any case, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.